Okay, good evening, everybody. We welcome you to our Thursday night platform. Let's talk about it. Thank you for joining in tonight, whether it be Facebook Live or Zoom. We are grateful tonight that the Lord have blessed us to see another day, and our guest is here tonight, Brother George Washington, and we're going to have a real important conversation that I think will benefit all of us. And it's our desire that we become more equipped in our knowledge about certain things, especially when it comes down to ourselves and our families. And so tonight, I'm going to take this opportunity and ask Brother George if he would come and introduce himself, and then he'll turn it back to me and we'll get the ball rolling for tonight.
Thank you, Bishop. It's a pleasure to be on with you guys tonight. My name is George Washington. 55-year-old black male, military experience, law enforcement experience, some educational background, but most importantly, what I want to share with you guys tonight deals with organ donors, and it has impacted my family and some of the things that you can prepare for while we're on this side of the turf. So thank you again. I'm down in Tampa, Florida, so thank you guys a lot for having me on, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for consenting to be our guest tonight. And I think this topic is going to be able to bless all of us, especially since it has come close to your front door in a couple of ways. And so tonight we're going to talk about organ donors. Many of us know that if we want to be an organ donor, there's a little thing on the back of our license that we can sign and say we want to be an organ donor. But I think after you hear this message tonight, you want to be a little bit more cautious and think things through and make sure that your family has been informed of what your wishes are as it comes down to you and what you want to do when you leave this side. So George, tell us a little bit about your experience. Tell us about if I'm hearing about organ donor for the first time, enlighten me and tell me what that is. You're on mute. Can't hear you. Okay, still can't hear you. Still on mute.
How's that, Bishop?
Okay. Got you.
All right. What happens when you're considering organ donation is that you think about, well, I may have to give a kidney or a liver or a heart, but we don't ever think about the details of what's going into it. I'll give you a quick example and then I can talk to you about it a little bit more. My nephew, who passed a couple of weeks ago, when he got his learner's permit at age 15, he selected that he wanted to be an organ donor. It was on his driver's license. So at that age, I know when I was 15, I was just happy to get a learner's permit. I wasn't thinking through all of the things that may come with, or the responsibility that comes with having a driver's license. And I surely did not think about being a organ donor at that time. But just real briefly, so we're at the hospital and we're finding out that he's brain dead. And I'll talk about that a little bit later because that's a trigger that triggers everything once that announcement is made. And so then about 20 minutes after we found out that he was brain dead, the organ donor organization came in and started to talk to my sister about it. And she was very upset at the time. So they took her down the hall and spoke with her. And shortly after that, she came back and she was very upset. And she said, "Hey, Vincent is an organ donor. I didn't know anything about it." I said, "Do you have his license?" And that's the first thing that we think about. Is it on your license? And so she said, "No, he hasn't had a license since 2013. I said, "Okay." I said, "Where's the selection notification?" So the donor organization had a selection letter that he made when he was 15 years old. So I challenged it and I said, he may want to be a donor, but we cannot verify that based on this information. So we need further verification. So I'm gonna stop right there and say this. Once you make that initial selection, it will carry through unless you go back and make a change. So if you make it at age 15, at age 16, at age 20, whatever your age is when you get your license, that selection would carry over. Now, what the organizations are supposed to do, and I say organizations, the DMV, motor vehicle, they're supposed to ask you each time that you renew your license that I want to be a donor. But what you will find that happens, and if most of you can remember, they don't always ask you that question. So whatever that first election is, that carries over. So, and what does that mean? So if you go in and you pass away, they take full control of your body. They will keep your heart pumping for 24 to 48 hours until they retrieve all of the material from your body that they're going to use. What I want to do is stop right here and see if there's any questions, because I'll start talking and I'll just talk straight through. So let me give the opportunity to ask any questions. I'm going to go back and address some other issues, but I just want to see if there's any questions just from that intro that I had.
Okay, let me look in the chat box. I don't see any in the chat box at this point, so you can keep rolling.
Okay. So what does it mean to be an organ donor? That process is surgically removing organ or tissue from one's body. And what I mean by tissue, it could be eyes, it could be your bones, it could be, that's generally falls in the line of tissue. You could also have your regular organs like your heart, like your kidneys, those type things. My nephew, it was a full body donation. What that means is he did not specify what organs they could take. So they took his bones, they took his heart, they took kidneys, and I don't have the remainder of the items that they took, but they took all of that from his body. And there was nothing that his mom could do about it. So initially I thought, well, maybe this is not the best thing. But I give it some thought and I said, he's giving life to someone else. And we don't know who the donation went to at this point. You can request that information, but we don't know at this point who the donation went to. But I will tell you is that how you avoid the hospital donor representative taking all of the body parts is you have to have your paperwork done early. Yes, it's on your license, but you need to clarify. You need to clarify it. You need to also do a living will, and you also need to be a part of the registry. I will send all of this information to Bishop once we get off, because what I decided to do was go pull the information for the state of Virginia and Maryland. I didn't do it for the District of Columbia, but I know that you guys are there in Virginia. So I got it for Virginia and Maryland, which I will share with you, would make it easy for you to do the registration. But what I want to tell you is to make sure that you do that. And when you do the registration, here's what happens. It allows you to have some input into what happens to your organs. And what I mean by that is that, let's just say, I'll use another example from my family situation. I have a sister, an older sister that needed a kidney, and my nephew's father's brother needed a kidney. So part of our discussion with the hospital staff was, hey, we have relatives that are registered in a region that need these body parts. And the answer was basically no. They would not allow us to use my nephew's body parts for our family members, which that was just awful. So at that point, I threatened to file an injunction to stop it. And so they said, okay, give us a few minutes or give us a couple hours to see what we can do. I gave them the information, the name of the individuals that we needed those donations to go to. And they said, okay, we're going to look in the registry and see if we can find them. And then we're going to try to make this work. Well, unfortunately, they waited until the courts closed that day. And then they walked into the room and asked my sister to leave and said, we're going to do what we want to do. God is my witness. That is what happened. And so at that point, can you still file an injunction? Yes, but you have to find an after hours judge. You have to find a lawyer. I mean, there's so many things that go into it. It can be done, but you don't want to put yourself in that position. You want to be in the position of, I don't know if this is the right term, but you want to be in the position of power so that you can say, no, we're not going to do that. And once you register, you have that opportunity to say, even though you may be, in my nephew's case, he was brain dead. At least that was the term that they used. So when you register, and I wanna emphasize that as much as possible. When you register, then you have some say-so, or all the say-so basically as to where your organs should go. So I want to pause and see if there are any questions or anything that was not clear about what I just said.
There is 3 questions that's in the box. I'm not sure whether you can see them. The first question is, does the decision cross state lines?
Yes, it can cross state lines. Like my nephew was in Tampa, Florida. My sister was in Savannah, Georgia, but she was registered in the region for Atlanta, Georgia. So you can register in different regions, and as long as you are in a registry, that's key. But yes, you can have your body parts go to a different state, but you have to be registered. So yes, it can cross state lines. And if you're registered, it's a national registry, so they will be able to see it within a few minutes.
Okay, can you see the second question? Do you ever have to check yes to being a donor?
That's a good question. I will tell you yes. According to state law in Florida, I did not look at any of the other states, you have to check yes. However, let me just tell you, if you don't check yes, the assumption is yes. It's not no. So at that point, what happens is they pursue you to pressure you at a time when you're vulnerable to make a decision for your loved one's organs. Now, you can say no, and what will happen at that point is that they will continue to pressure you, but then they will go and try to find a representative from whatever region that you're in, and they'll have them come in and talk to you and say, look, we have a patient. Sometimes they will even bring a picture of them and say, hey, we really want to help this person. Would you please allow your family member to be donated? And so the pressure continues. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a family member that's fighting for you or advocate for you, they're gonna take those body parts. And it's unfortunate that that's the way it happens, but that's the way it happens.
Okay, there's a question from Facebook Live and say, do they take the skin?
Yes, they can take the skin. And I didn't know about that until just a couple of days ago when I was reviewing for this session. But yeah, skin is considered tissue, so they can take it. And I'm not sure what they do with it. I don't know if it's for testing or if it's for, research or something like that, or drafts or what have you. But yes, they will take skin.
Okay. Next Facebook question is, can you say that you just want to donate to family only?
Yes, you can. You can, but it has to be on your registry. Once you go into the registry, there are some questions that they'll ask you. You can say, I only want to donate a kidney, or I only want to donate the cornea from my eyes. I just want to donate my bones. You can specify exactly what you would like to donate on that questionnaire. Now, there's a couple questionnaires that will ask you, do you want to donate? So you check yes. And you have to be really careful, and you got to read the entire thing, because if you just check yes, then that means they take all or any of what they would like. Secondly, they will have one that has a partial. It would be a second question that has a partial, like, do I want to give a kidney or something like that, and you check the block yes. What you have to do is read down to the part where it says, would you like to specify how you want your organs to be donated? That's when you put in exactly what you want to happen. Like, in my particular case, my personal case, I'm actually working on mine now. After this is the second time that this has happened to a family member of mine in 2 years, is that I'm saying exactly what I want to happen, who I want it to go for in an order. Like, for an example, if I have a family member that needs a kidney, I'm saying I want this to be donated to my family member first. However, I have to put some stop gaps in there to say, if they're registered, I would like it to go to them first. And the reason I say if they're registered is because I want my family members to be responsible too. Because if there's another person out there that could use my organs that are registered and that are doing everything the right way, I would like for, to be able to participate. But I want my family members to have it first. Secondly, I would, in my case, would like to donate to my church. If there's a member in my church that has a situation where they need an organ or something like that, and I'm a match, then fine. And then third, I wanted to go to an African American community. And there's some information about African Americans and donation, because I think the information doesn't get out like it should. And sometimes we're confused about if we should or shouldn't donate and that kind of thing. But you can specify that you would like for them to go to an African American organization. So, and then they can determine what matches are from there. But the key is go all the way through the document and specify exactly what you would like to happen.
Okay. Next question is, can you check the register to check your status?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Once you can even check it with your driver's license. What I would tell you to do if you check it with your driver's license is, if you're not registered with a registry, but you did check the block on when you got your driver's license or your ID, you have to go to that state DMV, and it's usually listed. Well, you can find it two places. You can find it in DMV or the Secretary of State's office. And once you go to the Secretary of State's office, I'm a little bit more familiar with that process, is that you go in, they'll ask you some questions, you verify the questions, and then the first thing it'll tell you is whether or not you're registered, whether or not you're a donor. And then if you're not a donor, be careful with the blocks that you check, because it can be a little confusing. So just first thing you want to do is verify that you're a donor. Then it's going to ask you, do you wish to continue and I'm just using generic terms because they may not all be the same, but do you wish to continue? If you're not a donor, would you like to be a donor? Here's the kicker. They're not going to ask you what body parts you want to donate. So that's the downfall to just going through the DMV or the Secretary of State's office. It's more important to make sure you're within the registry, because if you're within the national registry, then it's no question about what you want to happen to your donation. I would also offer to make sure you put it in your living will or either attach the registration to your living will. Now, some of these can be filed in your probate court. I want to say all of the 54 states and territories allows that, but I'm not 100% sure. So, but whatever you do, just make sure if you have a living will, a will, make sure that registry is attached to it, so there's no question about it at the time that it's needed.
Okay, that's all the questions that's in the chat box. So I'll let you continue with your story. And I just want everybody to know that when this session is over, if you would like a copy, those who may be on Facebook Live and not a part of our church family, please put your email address, type it out so we can get it and we can make sure we can send you that information. Everything that he's going to send me, we'll make sure you get it, but we'll need your email address in order to get it to you.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about my mom now and what happened to me. So my mom passed December of 2018. It was actually December 27th. So she passed about 10 p.m. that night. So the next day, the very next day, I was sitting on the couch just preparing to, make phone calls to the folks that I had not spoken to yet and start to make funeral arrangements and that kind of thing. And so I got this call, and I'm not going to use the organization's name, but it was one of the donor recipient organizations here in Florida. And they were extremely nice at first, just saying, hey, this is so-and-so. And I really didn't hear them. I wasn't really focused on what they were saying to me. And they said that we're going, I just want to let you know that your mom was an organ donor. And I said, really? I said, I'm surprised about that. I said, I've been taking care of her for the last 8 years, and that's something that she never mentioned to me. And I had her purse just sitting on the table. I was actually going through her purse at the time, and I had her driver's license. And I said, well, I'm looking at her driver's license now, and there's no indication on there that she's a donor. And they said, well, yeah, she was a donor. And then they changed the conversation that, it would be so wonderful if we could, give life or give, these donations to someone else. And I tried to bring it back to the original conversation. Hey, she's not a donor. I'm looking at her license now. I said, I would really need you guys to send me something that indicates that she's a donor. So we went back and forth on the phone for about 20 minutes. And then it dawned on me that my mom was still at the hospital in a preparation room. And I'll explain that to you a little bit later. But I said, well, and I asked them, I said, well, where's my mom now? And they said, well, we have her. So the hospital, although the hospital and the donor recipient organization work together, once the hospital releases her, they really don't, but they tell you they releases her, they take over. They may keep her in the same hospital, in the same room, in the same bed, and she's deceased until they come and recover the organs. That is the most frustrating thing for me. But so to continue with this, they said, well, I'm going to send you the information, but as of now, she is a donor and we want her eyes. And it just floored me. I said, well, please send me the information and I'll review it and then we'll go from there. And they went on to say, well, you know that time is of essence, and we really need to, we need to make this work. So they sent me this documentation. This document actually was the same document or a similar document that they sent over from my nephew, where it says, it was just a standard block. I wish to donate my organs, and they have a date on there and that kind of thing. So I looked at it and I said, well, the first issue I have is that the date that she signed this is different from the date that she renewed her license. So they went back and forth with me on that for a minute. And so it finally got to the point where they said, we're going to do it anyway. And so, and it's really nothing you can do about it. It was the exact same thing that it said to my sister regarding my nephew. And so that was my first experience. But at the time, I was so, just wasn't thinking about all of the legalities and all of those things that go along with this. I couldn't fight the battle because I was moving my mother from one state to another to have the service, and that was causing some issues too. So I just didn't have the energy to fight that battle, and it had to be done within 24 to 48 hours. So they took her eyes. I talked with the funeral director, or my sister spoke with the funeral director, and they said that we will make sure that you will not be able to tell that happened. And I'll talk about that a little bit too, because you guys need to know about that as well. So that was the thing with my mother. And here's where I failed myself. So that was 2 years ago. And I did not take any action at that point to get my paperwork in line or to share this story with anyone other than my immediate family, which was my sisters and brothers. So when this happened to my nephew a couple weeks ago, it was like reliving the whole thing. We was there on a Monday night. They said we would give him 24 hours to see if he has any brain activity. And then after that, you would have 48 hours to make a decision whether to take him off the ventilator. So Tuesday came, he did not have any brain activity. They tested him. I was in the room when they tested him. And they said, we're gonna give you 48 hours to take him off the ventilator. And his father was coming from Virginia, actually. And so that was Tuesday. Wednesday, about 10 o'clock, I got a call and said, he's deceased. So I was like, wow, what happened? And my sister said that the doctor came in, he had no brain activity, and that was it. And I said, well, I thought they were gonna give him time for his father to arrive. And they said, no. So I got to the hospital, they were still in the room. So I walked in the room and he was still on the ventilator. His chest was still moving up and down. His heart was still beating. And I looked and I said, what is going on? And that's when my sister said, he's a donor. And I'm like, so they are going to keep his heart beating until they retrieve his organs. And I said, he was a donor. I said, let me see the paperwork. So that's when, that goes back to the beginning of the story when I said I talked about an injunction and all of that stuff. So it played out, but I thought that was just cruel and unusual to allow someone that you've already said pronounced dead at 1:27 that day. Actually, officially 1:27 that day, that he was deceased, but his heart is still beating. They kept his heart beating so they could do the transplant. And so that is just so unfortunate. And it's hard to get that that memory out of your mind, because you know that he's no longer here. But for the better of, you know, the organization and or you know, the hospital, for saying, hey, we got so many donor donations in this month or last month or whatever. It's unfair as to the behavior of the organization, and that is my complaint. I don't understand. I don't know for sure if my nephew was a donor or not. I know what the paperwork said. I know what his driver's license said. But what is totally unfair about that is to the way it's done. So while we were there, they were coming in, they pulled about 12, 16 tubes of blood and other liquids from him. His body temperature got down to about 36 degrees, and they maintained it there. It is just an unfortunate situation to go through. And so we got through that. The next day, he was still in the room. My sister went up to visit with him, and they finally told her she had to leave because they were getting ready to do take the donations, and the surgery was going to be that day at 5 p.m. So they took him in the basement of the hospital, and I'm assuming the recipient was there for some of those organs that I don't know, or they had to send them someplace else. But it took 7-8 hours for the surgery. They called my sister or his father when it was over, about 8 hours later, and said that the funeral director could pick him up, that they were releasing him. And so, and all of that is, you know, it was a surprise to us, but maybe he was a donor, and maybe God had a plan for him to donate his organs to someone. But it would have been nice if we would have had the opportunity to say where we wanted it to go, and that's the case. So I'm gonna pause for a second and see if there are any more questions.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions in the chat box, and I'll read them in just a second. But that sounds so sensitive, especially at a time when the family is grieving. And you would think that they would have a little more heart towards the family and a little more compassion at that time. But this is an eye-opener for all of us that are listening and watching tonight. Okay, the question is, if you are not registered or have a living will, can you leave words with a family member or spouse?
Yes, it's called a dying declaration. If you're not incapacitated to the point that you cannot make verbal communication, then the law says they have to accept it as long as one person heard it. So I would tell you that it's probably risky, given how aggressive these folks are. They may not accept that, but the law does recognize a dying declaration. So the answer would be yes, but I would tell you, check your state laws to ensure that it's accurate across all states and territories.
Okay, next question from Facebook. Are there any medical or health reasons that you will not be able to donate, for an example, being a diabetic?
My mother was a diabetic and she had kidney disease. So, and they still took her eyes, which that was surprising to me also, even after I looked at it. No, actually not, because even HIV patients can donate. What they would do if they find a match for another HIV patient, they will just donate to that individual. So there's some matching criteria or requirements there, but yes, I'm sure there's something out there that they may not accept, but for the most part, a clear evaluation, even like I said, an HIV patient can give to another HIV patient.
And let me ask you this: while you were going through this whole ordeal, was there anybody comforting you, trying to comfort the family while they're telling you they're getting ready to harvest the organs of your loved one? Was anybody there to show you any type of compassion at all?
No, I say no. Let me just make sure I'm clear. One of the young men that was a part of the harvesting team, he talked to my sister first, and then when I arrived, I went down and talked to him, and I was frustrated. So I was probably I didn't curse or anything like that, but I was very stern in my comments to him. And I told him, I said, look, I appreciate the fact that we want to help as many folks live as possible. I said, but I think we went about this the wrong way. And he said, in his words to me, I know that this is a very tough time for your family, and I want to do as much as I can to make you comfortable with this decision. And so that was basically his words, that he was telling me all along that the decision had been made. He was just, I want you to be comfortable with it. Not necessarily, can I get you a cup of coffee? Can we, something like that. The chaplain, I never spoke with the chaplain, but the hospital chaplain came in and he spoke with my sister for a while. But it's all to get your mind off of really what's going on and not to think about the legal ramifications, but to get to because they got 48 hours and they're trying to get to that 48-hour mark so they can harvest those. So other than the nurse that was in the room, she done everything that she could. And she was trying to tell us that night before, she said, look, he has no brain activity, but she could not legally say they're gonna, they're setting you up so that they're going to take his, organs. So one thing I did wanted to bring up in regards to the comforting thing is that, so they pulled my nephew's records the day before they told us he had no brain activity, which means they had already planned to do this. And I brought that up, and I said that to the harvesting agency. I said, this is just an observation for you, but here's the date that you pulled his file. He was deceased almost 30 hours later, pronounced deceased. So why did you guys pull his file before he died? That just leads me to believe that you knew that you were only keeping him on that ventilator until you could get notification to the folks that needed the organs. And there was not a word he could say. He didn't deny it. The only thing he said to me was, that's a good observation. And so the plan was already in place. So that's kind of the way it went.
This is really an eye-opener for all of us, because most of us think, or we probably have been told, we never knew this much information, at least I didn't, that all you have to do is check the box. And you think that just by you checking the box, they're going to do everything right. But clearly, based on two experiences that your family have experienced, we know that's not the case. Now, I can't speak for every city across the board, but at least we know that what we have to pay attention to when it comes down to this, because you hear so many stories. And for an example, where if you are sick, and now this is what someone had told me, and it was true. They said, listen, if you're sick, you might not want to put and check the box you want to be an organ donor, because even if you're not dead, they just might take you out just for the sake of getting your parts.
Yeah, and I tell you, for us to live in the most powerful country in the world, it saddens me to know that that could possibly happen. It is such an aggression with harvesting organs that it is a complete eye opener. So I would tell anyone, please just have something in place so that if you can help a family member or a friend or whoever, please do. But I hate to really say that that's a consideration, that they may let you, they may let you die so they could harvest your parts, because that list is extremely long. Here's another story with my mom. She was waiting on a kidney, and I was I was actually in DC working, and she got the call to come to the hospital. And on the way to the hospital, they called her back and said that the doctor said she was not cleared for a recipient. Absolutely false. I had the paperwork, everything in hand, because I was responsible for making sure everything was there. You have to keep a bag packed all the time with all of the information in it, just in case she got the call. She got the call. She was cleared. She was cleared 6 months before she got the call. And they generally clear you annually. Say, okay, you're set for a kidney. You're set for a kidney, or whatever your requirement is. They test you, throughout the year, and then once you get that 12-month mark, they say, okay, you're good to go for another 12 months. And she was good to go. I had the paperwork, and I was extremely livid. And that happened at one of the major hospitals here in Tampa. And so I said, well, I have the paperwork that says she was cleared. Why didn't she get the kidney? And they said, well, the doctor can really make the decision at the last minute. Even if the paperwork is good, the doctor can make the decision. I don't know if that was true. I didn't validate it. But I will tell you, people move around on the list. My mom had been on the list for about 5 years at that point. They will move you up and down the list based on your health. That's why they test you throughout the year. So let's just say you have something that goes wrong and you're number 5 on the list for type A positive, whatever. And then you have something go wrong. They will either take you off the list or freeze you in your spot, but they will jump people over you. So it is an education to really learn not only about organ donation, but about the healthcare system in general. So I would encourage everybody. It's not, they tell you everything is fine, but it's not. So you have to educate yourself on that. So yeah, that's a true story. That happened.
Okay, 2 questions. First one, what is the law for minors that don't have a license, especially young children?
If you're under 18, your parents have to give authorization. If you're under 18, your parents have to give authorization. Now, my nephew was 15 when he selected. I asked my sister, did you tell him he could do it? She said, I didn't take him to get his license. I don't know who took him to get his license. So, and that was 1989. And so I said, okay, so they just carried it forward. He checked the block and they carried it forward. But the law in Florida is if you're under the age of 18, your parents have to agree to it.
All right, here's another interesting question from Facebook. To make sure I understand, oh no, wait a minute, let me back up. There's one before that. Having this happen twice to your family, is there something unique about your family medical history?
No, not that I'm aware of. Based on any kind of test or anything, no. It just happened. I don't know if it was some kind of coincidental or what, but it happened. And once it happened to me, I've talked to several other folks that it has happened to. Similar. I worked with a guy of Caucasian descent. His father was on the list with the same time my mom. We were in the same region. They had been on the list about the same amount of time. His father got a kidney. His body rejected it. He got a second kidney. His body rejected that one. He had 2 kidneys before my mom was called for one. Now, what people will tell you is that there is no difference between who gets a kidney and who doesn't, regardless of your financial situation, your race, creed, or color. I'm not ready to say that that is not true, but I will tell you that we have to pay attention to what the facts show us. So if the facts show us that, rich, let's just start with rich people that make major donations to, when I say donation, financial donations to organizations that harvest organs, do you think they're going to go to the top of the list? I have no proof of that. I can only go by what my common sense tells me. Dick Cheney got a heart pretty quick. It wasn't, once it was determined that he needed it, he got it. So I don't like calling names, but those are the facts. Those are the facts. We can research that. Let me just give you some statistics. And this little piece is called Closing the Donation Gap. That's between basically minorities and the majority. So although organs are not matched according to race, ethnicity, and people of different races frequently match one another, all individuals waiting for an organ transplant will have a better chance of receiving one if there are a large number of donors from their racial, ethnic background. Now, until this happened to me, I would not have believed that, but I do believe that now, and that's one of the reasons I said we as minorities, when we register, we should say we want our organs to go to the minority community. This is because compatible blood types and tissue markers, critical qualities for donor-recipient matching, are more likely to be found among members of the same ethnicity. A greater diversity of donors may potentially increase access to transplantation for everyone. Now, my family, given my family history, my grandmother, African-American, she had a couple children from a Caucasian. So I don't know that, and I'm thinking this through now that the person asked that question earlier on. I don't know if there's something there that made us attractive for organ donations or not. That I don't know. But I wanted to throw that out there. My uncle's father was white. So it would seem that maybe his children could go either way. It all depends on your matching. Patients from communities of color make up more than half, 60% of the national waiting list for a life-saving transplant. Now, I'm going to read that again, and the key word here is this. Patients from communities of color make up more than half, 60% of the national waiting list for a life-saving transplant. National waiting list. You're on the list, right? So half of us, half African Americans, 60% are on the list. There's others on the list, they're just moving up the list. And there's different reasons for why they're moving up the list. Organ donation among African Americans. 29% of people waiting for life-saving organ transplants in the nation are African American. In 2019, 15% of organ donors in a gift of life's region were African American. In 25 to 44-year-old age group, the rate of African Americans who have kidney failure caused by high blood pressure is 20 times higher than Caucasians. African Americans are 3 to 4 times more likely to progress to end-stage renal disease for chronic kidney disease than Caucasians. So we have some work to do so that we don't get to that point. We have some work to do so that we don't get to that point. But we also have to take into consideration what is fair by our birth rights. That's the argument that we have to make. What is fair by our birth rights? We were born into this country as American citizens. We have to be treated that way. And when you raise issues with the research that back up that information, not just being loud at the mouth, you know, like James Brown said, you're talking loud but not saying anything. We have to say something that means something to the people that can make the decisions. I'll stop right there. See if there are any questions.
And it's all about educating ourselves. I have a question, but I hold it for until I ask this one for someone on Facebook. Says, to make sure I understand, you must answer yes or on your driver's license. If the block is not answered, then the hospital is at will.
In this state, in the state of Florida, the hospital is at will. Now, what I will tell you is the U.S. registry, it doesn't address that issue particularly, and it may be there, and I just didn't find it in my research. So I would tell you to research that to make sure. For those families that are less fortunate, some families that don't have a spokesperson or someone that could talk for them or speak with them at that moment, excuse me, it may not be a choice, because normally what happens, sometimes the family members don't get there before the decision is made. If the person is dying and there's no family member there, they're going to make that decision. I'm sorry. They're going to make that decision. Can I show you that? I think I have enough information that I could possibly share that with you. But what I would tell you, to make sure you understand what your state requirements are. That's the most important thing. And how you help yourself is you complete the paperwork. You know, it could be one day, Bishop, you know, you hold a seminar at your place of worship and say, all right, we want everybody that's interested, come in. We got the paperwork here for you. You can do it. However, that is the most important thing. Have the say-so. Have the say-so to do it. That's what I think is most important. But I would tell you, check your state laws, because, again, I'm not familiar with all of them.
Okay, next Facebook question. To get clarification to my question, license must be answered yes or no. Neither is answered. Then the hospital is at will to do as they please regarding what the family decided.
That answer is yes for the state that I'm in.
Okay, so which means we have to, wherever you're living, we have to check the laws here. If you're from Virginia and you're watching with us, then you have to do a little bit of research and check, because you never want to assume anything. And because we know that organ donor is big business. And when you talked about the former vice president, this we can common sense will tell you status and money plays a big role, and especially we can see how we're living today, the season that we're living in, this COVID-19 season, this season of racism. All of these factors matter. So it behooves us to do due diligence by ourselves and what we want before we leave this earth, and make sure that we have the proper documentation, and we have had a lengthy conversation with our family members, and we got all of that wishes on paper. And then you have to make sure you notarize it and put it in a safe place and be able to retrieve it, and not assume that those organizations or even doctors at the hospitals are going to do right. So we can't assume it. We have to always stay on our toes and be watchful and make sure that our wishes are carried out. So that was the last question. This was some valuable information. And George, I appreciate you taking the time. We're going to talk tomorrow because I believe that you have some more information under your belt that I might want to tap into and might bring you back again. But this was a good topic. And so I hope that you take this serious. And for those of you who want the information, George is going to send us some information when this live session is over. So if you would like this information, if you're not a member of our church family, if you're watching by Facebook, please put your email address in it so we can get it, and we'll be able to send you this documentation so you can read up on it for yourself and not just assume, but you need to know. And it's important, after we have heard tonight the two experiences that have happened to George and his family, we need to have a conversation among family members. I know nobody likes to talk about dying, but guess what? Reality check, we're gonna die. Unless the rapture come back and take us up, we're gonna leave this side at some point. So we gotta be smart enough to make sure that we have these conversations, and nobody like to have these conversations, but they're conversations that need to be had. So we don't wanna wait until the last minute and say, well, I think she wanted this, and then somebody else will say, well, I think they wanted that, and here you are. And we know by George's experience how pushy these organizations are. So when they want something, and especially if it's a person of status and it's a person that got dollars, if you ain't got your paperwork right and you're stuttering, guess what? They're gonna go and handle that business, whether you want to hold up the process or not. Another question from Facebook. Can you have a living will stating that you do not want to donate? Does the hospital has to abide by that living will?
Yes, they do. They do. And what most hospitals, and this is US law. When you go to the hospital, they're supposed to give you a living will form at that time. Now, I do remember that happening with my mother, but I didn't do anything with it at the time. But they're supposed to provide you with a living will form. That's US law. So yes, they have to go about it. It could be a handwritten note, as long as you can show that your will is being done, what you want to happen with your body is being done. My mother was 72 and my nephew was 31. So it doesn't have any age range in there. He was 31, she was 72. Just a couple things I want to leave with you. There are three types of donors, and I talked about this generally, but I just want to read it to you so you know. There are three categories of living organ donation: directed donation, The donor specifically chooses who will receive the organ transplant. Non-directed donation, the donor is neither related to nor known by the person in need. And then there's a paired donation. The paired donation is, let's just say for an example, it's two people that do not have a match, but there's two others that do have a match. So what you do is you flip-flop those. That's called a paired donation. And then the last thing I want to leave you with is it's called the deceased donation process. So the first thing I talked to you about is the living process. You got some chances to make your decisions. The deceased donation process, you know, registering as a donor, you got to register. Medical care of potential donors. Okay, for someone to become a deceased donor, he or she has to die in a very specific circumstance. Most often, a patient comes into the hospital because of illness or accident, such as a severe head trauma, a brain aneurysm, or stroke. The patient is put on artificial or mechanical support. That's what happened to my nephew, which keeps blood with oxygen flowing to the organs. The medical team does everything possible to save the patient's life. That's what you got to be cautious about. At this point, whether or not the person is registered donor is not considered. So just make sure you understand. That's what I think the young lady was asking me earlier. When you are the person was asking, deceased donor process. I want to read that one more time. The patient is put on artificial or mechanical support, which keeps blood with oxygen flowing to the organs. The medical team does everything possible to save the patient's life. At this point, whether or not the person is a registered donor is not considered. So you gotta make sure you're registered. Brain death testing. This is vitally important. This is the signal that tells you they're getting ready to harvest your organs. They're gonna say you have no brain, or the family member has no brain activity. If there's no brain activity, from the minute they tell you that, whether they give you any more information or not, 24 hours later, they have to do another brain test. At that point, when they do that second brain test, it's over. They go into harvesting mode. So there's some other things I can go through, but I know we're short on time. If I can give you anything, get a referral, gather the information, select a transplant center, schedule an evaluation, and get listed if you need an organ.
A couple of things that I want to remind all of us tonight. Now, we will hear this conversation, and while we're talking tonight, we know that it's important. But then when we leave and the Zoom session is over, and a couple of days will go by and we'll forget all about this until something happens. But we need to be proactive. I don't believe in coincidences. God has ordained each person that has been on. Let's talk about it. And there's a reason why we're having this conversation. So let's be diligent about making sure we have all of our documentation in place. Now, most of you know that all of us got a junk drawer, and we got everything in there, from a screwdriver to stamps that's where we just stick everything in, where we don't know where else to put it. But it's important that we can put our hands on all of our important documentation. And then one last thing before I allow George to give us his closing remarks is, it's important also to make sure you have an attorney, a family attorney, because if you get in these situations, you need to be able to call someone that knows the law, that can speak on your behalf and help you in these situations. Now, my friend Michael Sturdivant is on tonight. Thank you, Mike, for introducing me and George. And I, you know, I don't take these introductions lightly. I appreciate all of those that have come on our platform, and I'm going to stick with you all. This won't be our last time talking. I got all of you in my Rolodex and different places, and so I'll be able to know when certain things happen. I can call and get some information. But it's important that you make sure that you have all of your affairs in order. Now, Sturtevant, if you can hear me, if you're able to type in the chat box, there is a organization where you can actually pay a certain amount a month to have an attorney to probably help you with mostly anything. So if you can hear me, type it in. If you can't, we'll make sure that you get that information. So, George, I'm going to give you the opportunity to close us out with closing remarks. And for the New Life family, please take this opportunity to give George some shout outs and thank yous for allowing us to use some of his time to come on tonight and share what he has shared with us tonight, which is very valuable information. Michael Sturtevant has put the information in. Now, some of you probably have heard of this before. Legal Shield is only $25 a month, and a free will comes with that service. So there it is. Michael, if you have any other information, such as an email address, or there it is. Okay, all right, there's the website. So you can get that information, jot it down. If you don't have a family attorney, you might want to get in contact with Legal Shield. $25 is not a whole lot of money. We can blow that up and stopping at a fast food place. So when we consider detrimental stuff that deals with our family, we want to make sure that we are getting sound information from someone who knows the law. So again, thank you, George, for taking this time to share the information that you have shared with us tonight, which was very valuable. And it is always hard to hear stories like this that family have to experience. Death is hard enough, and then having to experience with trying to fight these organizations about trying to take family body parts, that just adds more salt to the wound. I'm gonna allow you to have closing remarks. And thanks, Mike, for putting that information out for those who are watching tonight. And again, if you're watching by Facebook, if you have an email address that you would like this information that George is going to send me when this session is over, we'll make sure you can get it. So, George, before I say good night to everyone, you have closing remarks.
Thank you, Bishop. I just want to say thank you for allowing me to share my story with you. And what I would ask in return is that don't be like I was 2 years ago. You know, 2 years ago when I went through it with my mother, didn't really do anything to help my situation or put it on paper. And then it happened to my nephew. And I was like, I will not let this happen again. And so take action now. Even if you write it on a piece of paper, sign it, date it, and get somebody else to sign it, that's better than not having anything done. And I was just reading, they have added hands, face, and intestines to the list. So they can take your face, they can take your hands, and your intestines. So please, it's vitally important. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be a donor. I'm just saying, whatever your choice is, just make it sure that you have some input into where you want your donations to go. And thank you, bless all of you, and I hope that we can talk about something else on another session.
All right, thank you. For those who are watching us by Zoom, thank you so much for coming in tonight and being a part of this platform. And those who are watching by Facebook, thank you. If there is a subject matter that you would like to hear about, please provide us and let us know. T, if you can put our email information in the chat box, please let us know, and we'll try to make sure we do our best to bring the subject on Let's Talk About It. There's so many things that we need to make sure that we have our affairs in order. So thank you again, George. This was awesome. Our eyes have been opened. We have been enlightened. And I hope everybody, when we get off tonight, you have a conversation with your family members about your wishes and get all of your documentation in place, put it in a safe place where it can be found. Make sure that someone else knows about it other than you. So just in case if something comes up where you're not able to get to the hospital, somebody else knows about what the wishes are and they can go and stand on your behalf and make sure things go like the way that you want them to go. So thank you, everybody. Good night. God bless you. And prayerfully, we will see you next week at the same time. And we may possibly have George right back again next week. I'm going to chat with him again and tap into all of this education and knowledge he have under his belt to see what else will be a blessing to us. So good night. God bless you. And we'll see you soon.